May 16th, 2026, the costliest warship ever built eased back into Norfolk. Its crew came home heroes, the ship itself came home broken. 326 days at sea, nearly twice around the planet, with barely a trip home. 4,500 sailors, gone almost a year. Missed births, missed weddings. The longest carrier deployment since Vietnam. 12,000 sorties, 200 tons of bombs, 4 theaters, a fire that burned 30 hours. And when she finally reached home, the Navy's most advanced carrier was broken, not by any enemy, but by the deployment itself. Here's what the press releases skipped. Acid flushes at 400 grand each, a flight deck stripped to bare metal, 12 to 18 months in dry dock, and the worst part, the rest of the fleet can't cover for her. On the pier, the defense secretary pinned a presidential unit citation on the crew, the kind you only earn in combat. The CNO, Admiral Cottle, called it extraordinary. Both are true at once, a triumph and a bill coming due. This is the story of what it cost. $13.3 billion. That's the price of the ship we just watched break, the most expensive warship ever built. The Navy started drawing her up back in 2005. General Atomics, not Boeing, people mix those up, built the new launch system. Northrop Grumman built the hull at Newport News. The pitch was straightforward: retire the Nimitz class, keep most of the hull form, but bolt on 3 big upgrades. EMALS, an electromagnetic catapult that replaces steam. AAG, advanced arresting gear in place of the old hydraulics, and 11 new advanced weapons elevators that move bombs from the magazines to the deck faster than any carrier in history. Then reality hit. Ford was commissioned in 2017, but her first deployment didn't start until October 2022. 5 years tied to the pier. Why? The new systems weren't ready. The Pentagon's own testing office had warned it in 2017. Emails and AAG wouldn't reach minimum reliability for about 10 years after delivery. They were right. December 2021, the 11th and last weapons elevator finally passed certification. That's nearly 4.5 years after she was commissioned. Officially, the Navy called it a significant milestone. The blunt version, until that day, they couldn't fully arm the ship. But once those systems came online, Ford delivered. A short first deployment in October 2022, then a full one in 2023, stretched longer after Hamas attacked Israel. By 2025, she was finally ready for the real thing, a test no Ford-class carrier had ever been handed. June 24th, 2025, Ford left Norfolk. The plan looked routine: Europe and the Mediterranean, home by January. That's not how it went. 3 days out, she was crossing the Atlantic on the first leg of what became the longest single carrier mission since Vietnam. Here's the detail most coverage skips. The crew that took her out? A lot of them had never deployed. The chief engineer was on his first cruise in the job. 11 months later, that same crew earned presidential unit citations. How does a supercarrier end up chasing a dictator in the Caribbean? It started boring. North Atlantic and North Sea, NATO drills in July, just showing the flag. Then September flipped it, a hard turn south toward Venezuela. Maduro had become a problem. The administration wanted leverage, and the Navy provided it. Operation Southern Spear, a Ford-class carrier in the Caribbean. The first time I read that, I figured it was a typo. Why send the most expensive warship ever built to chase a cartel-backed dictator? Because nobody else could drop 12,000 sorties of pressure on Caracas. Nobody. By January 2026, Maduro was in US custody. Ford was cleared to head home. Then the plan changed again. Iran launched a major attack on Israeli and Gulf shipping, and the carrier got a new mission, Operation Epic Fury. Ford swung east, Mediterranean into the Red Sea. Carrier Air Wing 8 was flying combat sorties almost from the moment it arrived. Super Hornets, F-35Cs, Hawkeyes, hitting Iranian command nodes, anti-ship missile batteries, command and control. That non-stop tempo is something only a Ford class can hold, because Ford was the only ship in theater with the magazine capacity for it. 4 theaters in 11 months. North Sea, Caribbean, Mediterranean, Red Sea. 57,000 nautical miles. And yeah, I ran the math. That's farther than a full lap around the planet. Twice. And the crew? They lapped the planet twice with barely any time ashore. 3 port calls in the entire deployment. The strain kept stacking up. You won't catch it in the official photos, but it's right there in the data. Then came March 12th, 2026. Fire broke out in the laundry room. It burned for 30 hours. And honestly, this is where the deployment stopped being a clean success story and turned into something more complicated. March 12, 2026. About 8:30 in the morning, Ford was in the Red Sea, deep in Operation Epic Fury, when the main laundry space caught fire. The cause is still under investigation, no report released yet. What we do know, it burned for 30 straight hours. Smoke filled the compartments. Sailors were treated for smoke inhalation. Injuries stayed minor, thankfully. But 600 of them lost their bunks. They slept on mess tables, on the deck, in the galleys, for almost a week. And here's the genuinely impressive part. Ford never stopped launching. Damage control teams boxed the fire in. The reactor was untouched. The flight deck was untouched. CVW-8 kept putting strikes on Iran the whole time. For 30 hours, the most expensive warship ever built was literally on fire and still hitting targets inside Iran. Once the fire was out, Ford put into Suda Bay, Crete, then split in Croatia. Repairs, resupply, some rest for the crew, then back to the Red Sea. Epic Fury wasn't done, so Ford couldn't be done either. That's the part the press release got right. The crew kept fighting, the ship kept working. But every extra mile pulled a little more life out of her. And by April, the Pentagon already knew Ford was headed for a long stay in the yard. Here's what 12 to 18 months in the yard actually buys. The non-skid coating on the flight deck? Gone. Scorched off by thousands of jet exhausts. The entire deck has to come down to bare metal and get recoated. And the acid flushes, this part's real, run $400,000 a piece. She needs several of them per deployment. Emails gets a full recalibration. AAG the same. Plumbing Dream overhauled. The Laundry Dream rebuilt from scratch. The berthing spaces gutted by the fire restored. And some components don't just get repaired, they get redesigned. Redesigned. That's the scale of this. One retired commanding officer, anonymous, talking to National Security Journal, said it flat out, quote, "No one knows when she will sail again." That's not me editorializing, that's a former CO. 12 months is the hopeful number. 18 is the realistic one. Some analysts say 2 years. Now here's where it snowballs. While Ford was out, 4 other carriers were already tied up in maintenance. Stennis Dream, deep in a multi-year overhaul. Eisenhower Dream, 17 months of work. Reagan Dream, in the yard. Truman Dream, same story. That's 4 of 11 carriers already pierside. Ford makes 5. And this is the part that gets me. 5 carriers in maintenance, 6 left standing. 2 of those usually sit forward deployed in the Pacific, so you're down to 4 for everything else. The Atlantic, the Mediterranean, the Caribbean, the Middle East. 4 carriers, 1 planet. Mark Cancian, a CSIS analyst and retired Marine, told Stars and Stripes the carrier gap is, quote, concerning, and we just watched it play out for real. The moment the Pentagon peeled Ford off to the Caribbean for Maduro, there was no carrier in Europe, none in the Middle East. The gap wasn't a forecast, it was already here, and the fleet's about to lose another carrier. USS Nimitz, CVN-78, commissioned in 1975, 50 years at sea, Desert Storm, Iraqi freedom, all of it. She was due to retire in May 2026, the same month Ford came home. The Navy planned it that way. New Ford class arrives, old Nimitz steps aside, clean handoff. Except the next Ford class isn't on schedule. USS John F. Kennedy, CVN-79, was supposed to deliver in July 2025. That's now been pushed to March 2027. The cause? The same systems Ford fought with, AAG certification, the weapons elevators, the Pentagon's own budget documents confirm it, almost 2 years late. So now the Navy's boxed in, retire Nimitz in May 2026, and the fleet falls to 10 carriers for nearly a year. Federal law demands 11. Title 10, U.S. Code, Section 5062, Paragraph B. It's a hard floor, written by Congress. Last time the Navy asked for a waiver, 2009, Congress said no. So in March 2026, the same stretch Ford was burning in the Red Sea, breaking defense broke the Navy's call. A service life extension for Nimitz. Slide her retirement to March 2027, the exact month Kennedy is due. Bridge the gap. Keep 11 carriers on the books, even if one of them is 51 years old. And honestly, I'll just say it. That's not engineering, that's accounting. A 51-year-old reactor doesn't care what a statute requires. It cares about uranium half-life and metal fatigue. The Navy understands that better than anyone. They just had no other choice. But one aging carrier is the small problem. Let me lay the math out for real. 11 carriers on paper. Stennis, multi-year overhaul, gone until 2027. Eisenhower, 17 months in dock, maybe back early 2027. Reagan, maintenance. Truman, maintenance. Ford, 12 to 18 months, starting right now. That's 5 carriers pierside. Today, as we speak, that leaves 6 carriers in play. George Washington, normally homeported in Japan, currently out. Bush, Lincoln, Carl Vinson, Theodore Roosevelt, Nimitz, and George Washington. 6 for the entire world. And of those 6, Lincoln and Carl Vinson are in the Pacific, keeping eyes on China. Roosevelt's on a Mediterranean rotation. Nimitz is mid-move from Kitsap to Norfolk, halfway through her farewell mission. George Washington just dragged in from forward deployment in Japan. Genuinely free for a crisis? Bush. Maybe Roosevelt. That's the whole list. So when the Pentagon says 11 carrier fleet, here's the reality behind the phrase. One ship stuck out nearly a year because nobody could relieve her. 5 in maintenance, 6 available, and 3 of those already deployed. Plus 1, Nimitz, that's older than half the people watching this. This is the real carrier crunch. The GAO, the Government Accountability Office, flagged a $1.8 billion maintenance backlog last year. And that figure doesn't shrink when you run carriers harder. It grows. Every extra sortie, every extra day at sea, every Pacific transit. The bill just keeps compounding. So here's what the doom headlines get wrong. This is the part that actually matters. Yes, Ford broke. Yes, the Nimitz extension is duct tape. Yes, Kennedy's late. All of it true. But here's what's also true. The systems on Ford work now. Emails launched 12,000 combat sorties without one major failure. AAG recovered every single one, and all 11 weapons elevators ran non-stop for 11 months. That's the part the 2017 DOT and E report didn't see coming. Or, to be fair, it figured the systems would get there eventually. It just took longer than anyone wanted. First of class engineering always overruns the press release date. The good news is, in the end, it actually works. Kennedy is already out on sea trials. On January 30th, 2026, she left Newport News for her first builder's trials. Same emails, same AAG, same elevators as Ford. The difference? The Navy now knows where the problems are. Kennedy won't repeat Ford's 5-year shakeout. The lessons are baked in, and she's arriving ready for the F-35C. And the crew of Ford? 326 days. Multiple combat operations, a 30-hour fire. They came home wearing a Presidential Unit Citation. That award doesn't get handed out for just showing up. It's for combat heroism, full stop. The crew earned it, and the ship only survived because of them. And Hegseth said it plainly at the ceremony. Quote, "These sailors went 3 times around the globe to defend that flag right there. I'm not gonna add a thing to that. It stands on its own. But heroism alone can't close a carrier gap." So how does the Navy dig out of this? 3 moves. Finish Kennedy. March 2027 is the new delivery target, and Newport News is on it. The hull's in the water. Sea trials are underway. Kennedy becomes the 2nd Ford class to deploy. 2. USS Enterprise, CVN-80. The 3rd Ford class being built at Newport News right now. Back in 2017, the Navy locked emails and AAG contracts for both Kennedy and Enterprise. Same ship set, same supplier, General Atomics. So Ford's hard lessons are already built into Enterprise. 3. Fixing maintenance itself. That GAO backlog isn't only money, it's dry dock space, skilled welders, trained electricians. The Navy's been pouring billions into shipyard upgrades at Norfolk, Puget Sound, and Pearl Harbor, slowly. Some of it rides along on the Kennedy and Enterprise contracts. The infrastructure is improving, not fast enough, but improving, and the deployment cycle is being reworked. That forward carrier in Japan, its rotation runs on a different rhythm now. Smaller combatants, destroyers, and frigates absorb some of the presence work. And the amphibs we broke down in another video, the Lightning carriers, cover some of the gaps too. Not perfectly, but they cover them. None of this closes the gap fast. None of it gets Ford back to sea in 2026. The Pentagon is buying time. 18 months for Ford, 10 months for Kennedy, a few years for Enterprise. And meanwhile, 10 carriers keep doing 12 carriers' work. And one country is watching every bit of this. From Beijing's chair, all of this is intelligence. Ford down for 18 months. Nimitz stretched past her reactor's design life. Kennedy late. 5 Nimitz-class carriers pierside at once. China watches every piece of it closely. They count what we count, and they've got their own math to run. The PLA Navy fields 3 operational carriers now: Liaoning, Shandong, and Fujian, the newest, with electromagnetic catapults, like Ford's. A 4th, the Type 004, is being built. Ship for ship, they can't match American carriers, but they don't have to. They only have to match what's available at any given moment, and right now, that bar dropped. And this is exactly what Cancian flagged. When the Pentagon sent Ford to the Caribbean, there was no carrier in Europe or the Middle East. For weeks, China noticed, Russia noticed, Iran noticed. That's not hypothetical, it happened in November 2025. This is the strategic hole the crunch opens. You can't be everywhere with 10 carriers. You could barely do it with 11. Adversaries learn to read the gaps. They time their moves. They count the days a US carrier isn't where it should be. The 326-day deployment exists because of those counts. That's why this story matters. Not because Ford failed, but because she succeeded too well, and now everyone pays for it. Here's the question hanging over the homecoming. When does Ford sail again? Nobody will give a straight date. What's certain is where she goes first. A planned incremental availability, PIA in Navy speak, dry dock, crew rotation, some transfer, most stay. She's inspected keel to mast, parts redesigned, replaced, or rebuilt from scratch. Kennedy delivers in March 2027 if nothing slips again. Enterprise follows, now tracking toward 2030. Then Doris Miller, CVN-81, the fourth Ford class, not even in the water yet. Bought in 2018, still under construction. Delivery around 2032. The Navy buys these in pairs now, saves money, slows nothing. As for the rest of the Nimitz class, most of the ones still in service will keep steaming into the 2030s. Eisenhower, Vinson, Roosevelt, Lincoln, Truman, Reagan, Bush, Stennis. Most get service life extensions like Nimitz did. Most run past their original retirement dates because the math demands it. Meanwhile, the war with Iran isn't over. Maduro's in custody, but Venezuela's instability isn't. China isn't slowing down. Russia keeps probing the Arctic. The Houthis are still firing on ships in the Red Sea. Demand for carriers isn't shrinking, it's growing. And here's the thing nobody at the Pentagon wants to say out loud. That 326-day deployment, it's probably not the last one. As long as the gap exists, deployments run longer than planned. Crews rotate less. Ships wear faster. The math compounds. Until Kennedy delivers. Until Enterprise joins the fleet. Until the cycle resets. Until then, Ford rests. 326 days at sea. 12,000 sorties. 200 tons dropped. A 30-hour fire. A presidential unit citation. The longest carrier deployment since Vietnam. One ship, one crew, one bill, and the Navy will be paying it for the next 2 years. That's what 11 carrier doctrine costs in 2026. The Pentagon will get more carriers. The math will improve. But until then, every American carrier you see at sea is pulling double duty, including the one in dry dock at Norfolk.